بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الهزن إذا شئت سهلا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue our reading of our text, Sunan al-Tawfiq, the ladders to success in truly loving Allah Tabaraka wa ta'ala. As we all know, I am not in the best of shape, but inshallah, so I keep the video off. And we'll read as much as Allah will, and we'll go over. My intention is, inshallah, we'll read through the whole book over the next couple days, and I'll explain as much as I can without overtaxing myself. So it'll be not a lot of explanation, but we should still continue and cover the material. And inshallah, if Allah gives more energy, we'll go into more details and more explanation, inshallah. So we're going to start at the bab of al-tahara wa salat, inshallah. Let us begin now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, Purification and prayer. Prayer times. Among what is obligatory are 5 prayers during the day and night. Noon prayer. Its time is from when the sun passes the zenith, i.e. declines from the middle of the sky towards the west, until the shadow of every object is the same length as the object, minus its shadow when it, i.e. the sun, is at its highest point in the sky. Number 2, afternoon prayer. Its time is from after the end of noon prayer's time until the sun disappears. Number 3, sunset prayer.
The disappearance, this is al-asr. It says, وَوَقْتُهَا مِنْ بَعْدِ وَقْتِ الظُّهْرِ إِلَى مَغِيبِ الشَّمْسِ. So when we say sunset, we mean the complete disappearance of the entire disk of the sun in the western horizon. So some people, they wait till it is complete darkness. This is the time of Isha. So even though the sun has set, you will still see light in the western horizon.
Number 3, sunset prayer. Its time is from after the sun disappears until the red glow along the horizon disappears.
So from the time the sun sets to the complete disappearance of the redness in the western horizon, this is the time of Maghrib. To be more cautious, one should pray Maghrib as soon as possible. And even though that is a longer window, what is more precautious is to pray Maghrib in a time that is enough to make a tahara, purification, and to pray 5 brief rakah.
Number 4, night prayer. Its time is from after the end of sunset prayer's time until the rising of true dawn. Number 5, morning prayer. Its time is from after the end of night prayer's time until the sun rises.
In the Shafi'i school, the term al-Fajr is mentioned in our books as as-Subh. As-Subh is al-Fajr. It's the same thing, the morning prayer. Now,
these 5 obligations, furud, within their times are required of every Muslim who is mature, of sound mind, and pure, i.e. from menstruation and postpartum bleeding.
As we talked about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. That verily, the prayer is prescribed on the believers at specific times. And we mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إن خيار عباد الله الذين يراؤون الشمس والقمر وأذل لذكر الله. Verily, the best of the servants of Allah are those who observe the sun, the moon, the stars, and the shadows for the remembrance of Allah, meaning awqat as-salat, or the times of the prayer. Now,
It is unlawful to perform them before their time or to delay them beyond their time without an excuse.
and the sin of performing before the time is much more severe than performing after their due time. Because if you pray before the prayer's time, the prayer is invalid. If you pray after its time, it is qada, it is a make-up prayer. So the sinfulness of praying before its time is more severe because the prayer will not be counted.
One is required to make them up if a preventer like menstruation, postpartum bleeding, insanity, loss of consciousness, intoxication, and apostasy arises after a period of time has passed from the beginning of its time long enough to contain its performance, without taking into account the time required for obtaining purification for it, for someone free of incontinence and its like, and long enough to contain it along with obtaining purification for it, for someone with a medical condition like incontinence.
In other words, for those people who can perform a tahara before its time, then they only need the time to perform the prayer, right, before they're obligated to make it up. As for the one who has a condition which does not allow them to perform a tahara before the time, entrance of the time, then they need the time also to perform tahara. So the woman who is having a bleeding that is not the menstrual cycle, or a person who has incontinence of urine, such people, they have to perform a new tahara with every obligatory prayer. So they cannot perform tahara before its time is entered. Now,
But if the preventer ceased while enough time remains to say the opening Allahu Akbar, Allah Ta'ala is most great, one is responsible for it, while also being responsible for the prayer that is its predecessor, if it is one that is permissible to combine with the current prayer with it.
so
When the,
go ahead.
when the duration of being free of the preventer is enough to encompass purification in both prayers.
So here, those prayers which are combinable, which is al-dhuhr and al-asr, and al-maghrib and al-isha. So if one has enough time when the preventative matter ends, then one makes up that prayer and the one before it if it can be combined. So if it is at the end of Asr and one has enough time to say Allahu Akbar, Dhuhr and Asr must be made up. If it is the end of Isha and one has time to say Allahu Akbar, then Isha and Maghrib must be made. Naam.
What is required of guardians? It is required, being a communal
The
obligation.
guardian here is whoever has authority over the child, whether it is the mother, the father, the grandfather, whoever is responsible for them. Now,
It is required, being a communal obligation, for the guardian of an immature male or female who has reached the age of discernment to command them to pray and to teach them its rulings after 7 lunar years of age. After 10
even
years,
if those prayers are make-up prayers, they should make them up.
After 10 years, he is required to strike them for forsaking it, like he must for fasting that they can endure.
And the hitting should be in a way that does not leave marks and does not involve hitting in the face. Now,
He is
it is
also
a way of training them in manners. Now,
He is also required to teach them what beliefs and rulings they are able to understand, and to teach them what is obligatory for them and unlawful to them after maturity as well, and likewise what has been legislated, like sawak.
so they must learn the matters of the creed, and we mentioned them when we mentioned the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his oneness and his existence and his power and his beginninglessness and his having no end, his non-resemblance to creation, his non-neediness of creation, his speech, and etc. among those attributes that are obligatory to attribute to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they must teach the child what is unlawful among in the rules of the religion and what they're obligated to do. So this is an obligation of teaching them teaching them the rules of the religion before they're responsible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum. O you who believe, save yourselves and your families. And the way you save yourselves and your families is by teaching them the rules of the religion. Now,
those in authority, i.e., the caliph and his representative, are required to execute anyone who forsakes prayer, even if it's just a single obligatory prayer out of laziness, after warning him according to its conditions, if he does not repent, i.e., if he does not pray.
Here, these rulings, and I want to protect us, really. We live in a time of too many imposters. And there's no need to be an imposter. The situation is bad, right? Muslims are in a crisis of leadership, a crisis of knowledge. And when you have this crisis, because we are subjugated by non-Muslims, and around the world, don't think that when I say we, just us in America, even the Muslim countries, unfortunately, are dominated by the West. We all know that. We're not like blind that we can't see what's going on. With that, Islam has lost its authority in the world. There was a time where the Muslim rulers were authoritative, right? So when we talk about the rules of the religion, the government would establish the rules. For us, even though we don't have government authorities, especially in the West, that ensures the rules of the religion are carried out, that doesn't mean we negate them. Nor do we assume rules that don't apply to us. In other words, someone says, I'm an imam, and I don't want no one to get deluded by this. None of us are imam that is met in the sacred law, right? Imam, you lead a masjid, you have a prayer, yes. Imam, where your ruling is binding and you making hukum and decision, this is not your place. And that doesn't put you down, it puts you in your place. A lot of times we get this idea that I'm an imam, so I could do whatever I want. There is rules. And you don't get, because of the absence of authority, you don't get to make your own rules or interpret rules the way you see them. That's why, for all of us, for our own protection, we have to have a sound grounding in one of the four schools of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in the science of rules of the religion of jurisprudence. And that's why we follow madhabs. So we don't have people claiming I follow Quran and Sunnah and making it up as they go along. And it may sound attractive. But here, why I mentioned this, because the author mentioned about the authority or the Khalifa, right? Right? The one who's in charge, right? Or his representative. None of us are the Khalifa, and none of us are the representative of the Khalifa. So we do the best we can within the bounds of the rules, but let's not extend ourselves beyond our ability, right? And this is dangerous, where we get people that forget this. So they apply all the hadith that relate to rulers like you a ruler. You're not a ruler. Whoever dies without a bay'at to an imam, he dies the death of jahiliyyah. You're not a ruler. You don't even fit the qualifications of a ruler. So how does that apply to you all of a sudden? Because the absence of rule, you become the sheriff? Look, you need to get the qualifications of the sheriff. Other than that, just teach as the rules are there, and inshallah, Allah will improve our situation. I think, is my point clear here? Because I don't want us to be misled in this issue. It's dangerous. Now, go ahead.
His legal status is that he is a Muslim. Every Muslim is required to command his family, i.e., his wife, his household, and his kin, to perform it, i.e., prayer, to force them to perform it if they neglect it, and to teach them its essential elements, conditions, and invalidators. And likewise, everyone else, i.e., from among the aforementioned guardians, authorities, husbands, and kin, who is able to do so.
So you have the obligation of enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, right? And that's according to the rules of the religion. But so that's your position. So you see an evil, mashallah, if there's an authority, you are a ruler, you remove it physically with your hand. That's the position of authoritative rulers, the Khalifa or his representatives. If not, you might need to come back in, Sister Fatima. I mean, is my voice clear? It might be from your end, because everyone seems to hear me. So you have the obligation of speaking against. I'm muted. MashaAllah. May Allah unmute you. Allah. You have the obligation to speak when you have the ability, or to hate it in the heart. But every rank of enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong is related to those who are accessible for that, or who are qualified for that. That's because we don't want in Islam anarchy, right? So therefore, we do what we can within our capacity. And that is extremely important. If a man has the ability over his family or his friends, he can order them, he should do it. As for, going beyond what is in our capabilities, this leads to terrorism. This leads to tatarruf, right? So be careful, inshallah. Now,
obligatory acts of ablution. Ablution is among the conditions for prayer. Its obligatory acts are 6. The first is the intention in the heart of obtaining purification for prayer, or another sufficient intention when washing the face. The second is washing the face.
We talked about this already, that among the conditions for the prayer, meaning the prayer cannot begin without, is al-wudu, right? And then the wudu has 6 obligatory parts. Pay attention to this, because this book is going to give us those things that we must do. Then the next text will come and they're going to build on it. And we'll build on that in the traditional way as we go through different books, up to the Reliance of the Traveler, which is available to us in English. So our intention is to read all of the books in the series of Shafi'i fiqh, and each level we will build upon what we covered in the previous level before. So right now, the author is going to talk about the obligations of al-wudu. And those obligations are those things, if they're not fulfilled, then the wudu itself is not valid, right? Whereas other matters, if you left them out, the wudu is still valid, but you are leaving off great reward. Now,
the second is washing the face in its entirety from the hairline of the head to the chin and from ear to ear. One must wash all hair and skin except the inside of a man's beard and sideburns when they are thick.
And we mentioned if the woman has hair on her chin and it grows, she must wash even the skin beneath. Now,
The third is washing the arms, including the hands and forearms, and including the elbows and whatever is upon them, like forearm hair.
Or paint or glue, all of that must be removed. Likewise, I admonish our sisters to be careful with nail polish. I know they have these absorbent nail polish that's supposed to go through your skin, but this is your prayer. I would, highly recommend you to avoid using that and to clean it off when you make al wudu. Now, for your safety, out of precaution.
The fourth is wiping the head or part of it, even a single hair within its area. The fifth is washing the
Or that wiping can bring moisture to the point. Wiping here is to bring moisture to the part that must be washed. So even if one took one's finger and put it under one's kimar, one's hijab, and wet the area on the top of the head, the hair, it is valid. Mm.
The fifth is washing the feet
As
up
an
to.
obligation. As an obligation. There is a sunnah way to do it. We will talk about it. But as the obligation, if you just wipe the portion of the hair on within the limit of the head, it is valid. Now,
The fifth is washing the feet up to and including the ankles, or wiping the hoof, provided the conditions for wiping are met. The sixth is ordering them the obligatory actions this
and
way.
we'll talk about the khuf later, inshallah, and what meets his conditions. So you can say it's really foot gear, that which meets certain conditions, and we'll talk about them later, inshallah. Now,
Ablution and validators. Ablution
after
is
talking about those obligations, then the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, Sayyidina al-Habib Abdullah bin Hussein bin Tahir, goes in to tell us those things that are invalidators of al-wudu. So once we perform the obligation, we must also what? Avoid the invalidators. So we should know what they are so that we can avoid them. Now,
Ablution is invalidated by number 1, anything that exits the two waste passages, i.e., the front and back orifices,
mm,
except for an individual's own ejaculate. Number 2, touching a human's private parts or the anus with the palm of the hand and without a barrier.
mm.
Number 3, a male touching the skin of an unrelated female, even his wife, who has neared or passed the age of adolescence, or the opposite, her
So
touching him.
except the child, which at an age that they're not normally desired. So the young child, it would not count as that. And the ajnabiya is that one who is marriageable, and the wife is counted among them. Now,
The ablution of the toucher and the touched is invalidated when they are of different genders. Each one of them is old enough to be desired, and they are not kin.
mm,
Number 4, loss of consciousness, except the sleep of someone whose bottom is firmly seated while sleeping.
now.
What is required consequent to something exiting the two waste passages?
So this is an istinja, the cleaning oneself after going to the lavatory. Now,
Cleansing oneself from everything wet that exits the two waste passages except sperm is required.
mm,
Cleansing is performed by washing with water until the affected area becomes pure, or by wiping the area 3 or more times until the affected area becomes clean, even if the effect remains, with something that is rough, pure, solid, i.e., not liquid, wet, or powdered, without sanctity, i.e., not revered, like food, before it, the wet substance that exited, is transferred from where it remained after exiting, and before it dries.
now.
Otherwise, water is obligatory.
So here, to make al istinja, you either use water, which is more superior to clean the area, or if you don't use water, you can use 3 pieces of material that is uprooting, pure, dry, and unrespectable, right? 3 pieces of material to the area is fully cleaned with only left a trace. So the minimum you can use, if you just use like toilet paper or a material that fits those conditions, you must wipe at least 3 times, right? Minimum. And more is necessary to remove everything except the trace. But the best thing is to wipe and to follow with the dry material and to follow it with water. Now, so combining both. Now,
The obligatory acts of the purificatory bath and what necessitates it.
so
Pur-
this is talking about, we talked about al-hadath al-asghar, the minor ritual impurity, which necessitates al-wudu. Now we're going to talk about al-hadath al-akbar, the major ritual impurity, which necessitates al-ghusl. Now,
Purification from the state of major ritual impurity, which is bathing and dry ablution when unable to bathe, is among the conditions of prayer. It is required in case of 5 things: ejaculation, intercourse, menstruation, postpartum bleeding, and giving birth. The
so
obligatory acts.
when any of these 5 things occur, then one is in a state of major ritual impurity and it necessitates al-ghusl. Now,
The obligatory acts of bathing are 2. Number 1, intending to raise the state of major ritual impurity or its like.
to raise raf il-hadath al-akbar, to lift that state. So even though physically you may not outwardly see it, one takes al-ghusl and it removes that state. Now,
Number 2, covering the entire body, skin, nails, and hair, even if it is thick, with water.
so the condition, the obligations of lifting the state of hadath akbar is the intention of lifting that major state when the water first touches the skin, and secondly, to wash the entire body. Everything else, hair and everything included, everything else is sunnah, and inshallah we'll talk about that with we'll talk about the more details in the coming text. Now, go ahead.
The conditions for purification and the essential elements of dry ablution.
Mm.
The conditions for purification are:
So, a tahara, purification, could be explained as lifting the state of ritual impurity, removing a najasa, or that which has its meaning, or that which has its form. I'll repeat. A tahara, purification, can be defined as lifting the state of ritual impurity, removing a najasa or Islamic filth, or what has the meaning of that, or the format of that. So there are conditions for any of those things to be valid. So they're called shurut al-tahara. The author is going to mention them. Now,
1 through 2. The individual being a Muslim and having discernment.
so the first that he mentions is al-Islam. So at-tahara is not valid from a non-Muslim. So that ghusl, at-tahara, is not valid except from a Muslim, except the non-Muslim woman, Christian or Jew, who is married to a Muslim man. For the purpose of marriage relations, her ghusl would be accepted. Now, at-tamyiz would be at the age that a child can distinguish, meaning they could tell you how many days are in the week, how many times Ramadan comes once in a year, like this. How many prayers? 5 prayers. In a way where they are clearly discerning between matters. That is a tamyiz. Now,
Number 3. The absence of anything that prevents water from reaching what is being washed.
Which we talked about, like if one had glue or one had some polish that prevented water from reaching the limbs, all of this must be removed in order for the tahara to be valid. Now,
Number 4, the water flowing.
and that is that it goes across the limb. So that is not wiping, the water must flow. Now,
Number 5, the water being purifying by not having lost its name through mixing with a pure substance that water does not need, and by not changing due to filth, even a slight change. When the water is less than qualitane, approximately 206 qualitane, I apologize, approximately 216 liters or 57.1 gallons, two conditions for it to be purifying are added. A, it not encountering inexcusable filth, and B, it not having been used in lifting the state of impurity or in removing filth.
now here that the water is mutahhir, which is pure and purifying. So water basically is of three types. You have water that is pure and purifying, meaning that water is pure in itself and it has the ability to purify other things. So that water is called tahur, right? Purifying water, or mutahhir, right? Then you have water that is pure in and of itself, but it doesn't have the ability to purify other things, right? So the water is pure, but it cannot be used for at-tahara. When we say tahara Islamically, because tahara linguistically means nadafa, it means cleanliness. But when we say it Islamically, we said it means lifting the state of ritual impurity or removing an najasa. So that water that is pure but not purifying cannot lift the state of ritual impurity and cannot be used to remove an najasa. But it can be used for other things. So that's tahir. Then you have a water that is najis, that is, it's not pure and it cannot be used to purify other things. How does this occur? Number one, if that water is mixed with a pure substance that the water can be protected from, and that water mixed with that substance, that to the extent that it's no longer called water, then it becomes pure but not purifying. As an example, so I have a bowl of water, and next to it, I have some soap detergent, right? And I can protect this water from this detergent, but somehow the water, the detergent falls in the water, and it becomes some soap so soapy that it's no longer termed water. In this case, this water that was pure and purifying before that soap powder got in it now has been mixed with the pure soap powder, but it changed the name of it that is no longer termed water. We call it soapy water or whatever, right? Then that water no longer is purifying, but it is pure. So we can't use it to lift the state of ritual impurity or to remove a najasa, but we can use it for other matters that pure water can be used for. The other way, so that's one way. The other way is that that water came in contact with an impure najis substance, right? That changed the water even if it's slight, right? So if that water is changed by a najis, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, by a najis filth material, then that water is no longer used valid for purification. So here, if the water, and that's why the author mentioned, if the water is kulatan, which is 2 kullas, roughly like 216 liters or 51 gallons. I remember what she said in this. Let me look. There are 2 cases. The first, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay. The first is we want to consider water when we want to apply this ruling in 2 ways. Either the water is less than kulatan, less than 2 kullas, right? Or it is kulatan or more. So the measure in the Shafi'i school for this ruling is the amount of water, a small tub, for instance. So if the water is less than kulatan, and that water just comes into contact with the najasa, even if it doesn't change its state, it is no longer pure or purifying. If the water is kulatan or more, then it only becomes najis, filthy, if it changes its color, taste, or smell. So that's how you weigh that out, inshallah ta'ala. Is that clear? Porta potty is najis. The water, you don't mean the toilet water, do you? This najis. You can't use the toilet water. It's najis. Subhanallah. Naam. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Go ahead.
Whoever does not find water or its use would harm him makes dry ablution after the time has entered and after removing inexcusable filth and knowing the direction of prayer.
So here, if one does not have water, right? And that is going to be a lot of details to that. We'll discuss it later because there's space and there's other things. But when one doesn't have water, or one would be harmed by using water, one can make what is called a tayammum, right? A tayammum, dry purification. And a tayammum is a ruqsa, is a dispensation. Hence, you cannot perform a tayammum except after the entrance of the time and the removing of an najasa. Now,
dry ablution is performed by applying unadulterated soil or sand that is purifying and contains dirt to the face, including the nose and the entire beard, and hands up to and including the elbows, in that order, with 2 strikes at the minimum, while intending to render prayer permissible, with the intention concurrent with transporting the soil and wiping the first part of the face.
wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, let us stop here. We're going to continue like this, inshallah, till we go through most of the book. And then hopefully it gives my body a little bit more time to heal. But I wanted to keep us going so we don't, we don't fall behind, and we can keep, our learning going, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khaira wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.